Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm the psych coach, and today I'm going to be talking to you about guilt. Guilt is something we all experience to a greater or lesser degree. Some people have a really strong propensity for guilt. It doesn't take much for their guilt to be triggered, whilst other people don't feel it particularly in a particularly pronounced way. However, irrespective of whether people have a propensity for guilt or don't feel particularly guilty, the trigger for guilt is always the same. The trigger for guilt is violating a personal moral code. The word personal is really important because what you may feel guilty about, I may not, and vice versa. So it's when we violate a moral code, when we behave in a way that we do not believe is appropriate for us. That is what triggers guilt. Like a lot of emotions, there is a healthy guilt and there is an unhealthy guilt. Unhealthy guilt is characterised by quite obsessive tendencies, a desire to perhaps seek excessive reassurance or forgiveness, to overcompensate, where you believe you deserve to be punished, where you don't think you're deserving of good things happening to you. Whereas healthy guilt is where people violate a moral code, feel bad about it and make appropriate amends to the party that's been wronged. They seek forgiveness in an appropriate way, but they don't obsess about the guilt, and neither do they believe they deserve to be punished because of the guilt. So the goal of this isn't to absolve you of guilt and to make sure you never feel guilty again, but rather it's to try and help you experience healthy guilt, where you're able to compartmentalise the issue, you're able to maintain perspective on the severity of what you've done, and it doesn't go round and round in your head in a very obsessive thought pattern. So what are the things you need to be looking out for unhealthy guilt? Well, in my experience, people who feel unhealthily guilty tend to lose perspective on the severity of their wrongdoing. They're not able to maintain perspective. They're not able to take into account mitigating factors which will have led to them, or at least contribute to them behaving in the way that they did. Now, sometimes people will say mitigating factors are just excuses. Thinking about mitigating factors gives me a way out of this situation. It lets me off the hook and I am not deserving of that. Mitigating factors aren't about letting you off the hook and absolving you of responsibility in this situation, but mitigating factors, and indeed considering what they are and how they played a part in your moral code violation, will allow you to see the bigger picture and recognise that actually there were probably some factors that led you to making a poor decision. Be aware of those mitigating factors. They aren't excuses, but they do allow you to see a bigger picture. Something else to be aware of with unhealthy guilt is overcompensation. If you're feeling unhealthily guilty, you are highly likely from a behavioural perspective to engage in overcompensation, which is where you go over the top. Think about a parent who's got angry at their child. They may end up going and buying them too many toys, or a partner that has, not been as considerate as they would like to be. So they go out and they buy a meal, or they book a hotel stay, or they buy a big bunch of flowers, and it's probably disproportionate to the wrongdoing. So be aware of overcompensating, because a lot of the time, if you engage in overcompensation, you're reinforcing the thought process of what I did is really, really bad. And the chances are it probably isn't really, really bad. Another factor to take into account when it comes to guilt is seeking appropriate levels of forgiveness. It may be appropriate that if you've wronged someone, you apologise for it and you say, I'm sorry, and if it feels important to you, that you ask for their forgiveness. But what you don't want to do is months and months, years and years later, still be banging that drum, desperately seeking forgiveness over a topic that really doesn't warrant that level of attention. Seek appropriate levels of forgiveness. Ask for forgiveness, say sorry, but don't keep banging the drum on it, begging for it. And indeed, if the person who you've wronged is not open to forgiving you, then that is something you have to get on with. You can't keep banging on insisting that someone gives you forgiveness if they're not prepared to do it. Something else to be aware of is seeking punishment. Believing that because you violated a moral code, you are deserving of punishment. And it may mean that you seek it out, that you believe you're not deserving of being treated well, that you're not deserving of being spoken to nicely. If you are in the mindset where you believe you need to be punished, I would suggest that you are probably experiencing unhealthy guilt. If that is the case, think about what advice or what input you would be giving your nearest and dearest if they had done the wrong thing that you had done. Do you think they should be punished for it? Do you think they should be punished to an excessive degree? Probably not. So try to step out of the loop of engaging in the thought process that you should be punished, and instead try and engage in the thought process that you're fallible, you mess up, you make mistakes, you need to seek appropriate amends, but you probably don't need to be punished for what you've done. And the final thing I would say to look out for when it comes to experiencing unhealthy guilt is guiltily splurging, where you've done something wrong, you've violated your moral code, and so you just want to splurge. You just want to splurge out everything that you feel bad about to get it off your chest. And actually, that can be an incredibly selfish thing to do. If you're doing it for a cathartic reason, because you think somehow guiltily splurging is going to absolve you of the responsibility of the wrongdoing, then think about the impact that's going to have on who you are guiltily splurging to. Often, our motivation to guiltily splurge is selfish. You may be imparting some knowledge on someone that they can't do anything about, something that may really pain them that they simply cannot do anything about to manage it in a different way. So be aware of guilty splurging, and if you are going to talk about your wrongdoing, think about the person who you're delivering that information to and what you can do to look after them if you're after some cathartic splurging. Now, I mentioned at the start that healthy guilt is where people maintain perspective on the severity of the situation, where they don't believe they deserve to be punished, where they don't engage in overcompensation, where they make appropriate amends, they seek appropriate forgiveness, but they don't obsess about the situation, and they do maintain perspective on the factors that led them to doing the behaviour that they did. Healthy guilt is still uncomfortable. It's not a pleasant feeling, but it is preferable to experiencing unhealthy guilt. So if, as you've watched this video, you've thought, okay, I do have unhealthy guilt, be careful of the behaviours that you're going to be engaging with that are exacerbating that. And hopefully, if you reduce them and if you're able to shift your thought process slightly into a healthier mindset, you'll be able to move the guilt into healthy guilt, and it won't consume your headspace so much. If you've enjoyed today's tips, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will give you plenty more tips on how you can use psychology on a day-to-day basis.